Call the meeting to order. Those that still need a coffee, please just get it and come back to the table if you feel the need. Ask Charles for a courtesy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yep, my pleasure. So, hei honore korore ki te atua, he maungarung ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa, hāngau te atua he nā ka hau ki roto ki tēnā o mātou, whakatongi o tō wairua tapu, hei āwhina, hei tohu tuhi o mātou, hei tiaki hoki, i o mātou mahi katoa i tēnei rā. Ko koe ana hoki tō tātou kai whakaora, āmene. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
There's no notices as such, so apologies.
I've got 2 apologies from Central Hawke's Bay, apologies from Anna Apahu, Mayor Craig Little, and Hiwi Tumuana. And just ask for this to be accepted. Remover.
I think Paul Bailey's in apology.
Oh, it was also Paul.
Paul is not here.
Yep.
And also apologies from Her Worship Sandra Hazelhurst. Thank you.
And the same for Mr. Dalton.
And Anna Apatu, we got Anna's.
Yeah.
we've got
Anna. Yeah. So in terms of, sorry, it's Tom, you moved, seconder. Charles, thank you. Any conflicts of interest or declarations that need to be made at this stage? If not, item 3 is the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 15th of August. For someone that was there, would someone like to move that those minutes be accepted as a true and correct record, unless there's any other? Yep, thank you.
Sorry, what's his name? Sorry, the name? It's all right. And who was the seconder? Thanks.
From Central Hawke's Bay.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
This is the only one.
Moving on to item 4, the follow-up to the drinking water supply issues in Central Hawke's Bay. This was a specific request from this group to the working group to follow up. The paper has been circulated as from the council, and that's from the council officers.
Yep, I'm happy to speak to it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, in essence, since the meeting of the 15th of August, when this particular matter was discussed, there's been a task force established with membership from a range of organisations, including the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Central Hawke's Bay District Council, to look at really water quantity issues down in the Ruataniwha area. There's 2 aspects really. One is around the increased minimum flows, which came into effect through Plain Change 6 on the 1st of July this year, and will have implications for large water takes, particularly irrigators. But the second one was around, in response to petition that the Regional Council had received earlier on in the year from residents of Tikakino and Ongaronga around lack of certainty around their domestic supplies and their concern that the large irrigation takes were directly impacting on their availability of water. So the task force has met twice, and as of this week, in terms of the residential water supply, there's a survey gone out to all the residences in both Tikakino and Ongaronga by Central Hawke's Bay District Council, and they're asking a series of questions around physical features of the bores that they use to supply their water, and so we hope to be able to get a better level of information about such important criteria as the depth of the bores and age of the bores and so forth on that. The paper just covers what other aspects of the work of the task force. It is a large group. There's been some requests for additional membership on it, but it's felt that probably at 25, it's probably its peak effectiveness, and really the key message anyone, if you are asked the question as a member of this governance committee, it's not a group that's looking to develop new policy. It's not an advocacy group. It's simply aware that with an increased minimum flow that they're having to learn how to live with it. And so there's been a lot of work done by the large surface water takes, especially to, if you like, they're looking at the Twyford consent model, where we have one consent for a whole range of takers, and they have formed a group to manage themselves, and that's the type of approach that's being taken with that. So really, this is just an update for you on where we've got to. Because of the work of that task force, the joint working group isn't directly involved, but there are a number of individuals who are members of both groups, so we've got those strong links back. So thanks, Mr. Chair. Happy to take questions.
Questions of Liz at this stage? Can I just say, one of the issues that were raised at the joint working group meeting last week was the absence of the DHB on that that task force, and certainly the joint working group suggested that a DHB representative needed to be part of the task force, and I think that was going to be taken on board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But other than that, the representation seemed to cover just about everybody. Well, would someone like to move that the report on the drinking water supply issues in Central Hawke's Bay be received?
I'll move.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Item 6 on the agenda, and I don't know where item 5 got to, but item 6 on the agenda.
Oh, item 5. Update on.
5, sorry.
Yep.
Yep.
The update on the tank plan change. Can I ask Craig, do you want to come up as well? And in case there's some specific questions around the... Eh? I know, it's a nice surprise for you. Just consider it like that. I'm wondering if you might sort of take us through this particular item. Have you got a copy of it in front of you?
I do. Can I just ask a question before we start? There's an acronym, RPC, in here that I don't know what it is.
Sorry, so that's the Regional Planning Committee. So that's the
Okay.
Hawke's Bay Regional Council's Planning Committee, which
Yeah.
has now received the draft
Okay.
plan
Just
change
that I
and is
couldn't-
working its way
Yeah.
through the issues where there wasn't agreement by the tank
Oh,
group.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Thanks.
Sorry.
Through you, Chair, and good morning, Committee. So the Joint Working Group had its last meeting on the 1st of November and went through a number of updates, and some of those are covered off in the action plan later. Probably one of the key activities the group has continued to be very busy on is in relation to the source protection zone work and the provisional protection zone work that we reported to this committee previously, and that was presented to the Regional Planning Committee, the RPC, last week. So that work's progressing well. There are a couple of just follow-ups that the RPC has requested of the Joint Working Group to proceed with, and there was just some further information the RPC was also wanting to get from particular areas. The key piece of work, one of the pieces of work following up is just around the definition of the provisional protection zone, which is a default zone around a municipal registered water supply that would apply if a registered water supply hadn't gone and done the extensive hydrological assessment to define the 1-year zone. So currently we've got a default circle, and the group's just going to have a look at, is there a better representation than a straight 2-kilometre circle. At the meeting, as one of the other elements, the Napier City went through their water safety plan, their learnings and initiatives that they're working on, and the group now has a schedule of each of the members of the group presenting their water safety plans, talking about their risks and their focus. In terms of the work plan, the two that are high, the first one I've just talked about was progressing that source protection zone work. The majority of that is now done. It is more the smaller dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Communication protocol, unfortunately, the meeting that was planned in September, there was a lot of people away on leave or unavailable, so that's been being rescheduled to further that communication protocol. And with a recent, the arsenic protocol, which was presented to this committee previously, we've just highlighted a couple of improvements that we could make to that as well, as you road test it with real life events. So that'll be worked through in that next meeting and reported back to the following governance meeting. And then the group will be moving on to those orange medium ones, which are in various states of starting.
Hey, sorry, you've jumped ahead to the next item as well.
Did I?
Yep.
Yeah, you're on the joint working groups. work
Update
plan,
6.
As opposed to
We
the.
were item 5, which was around the tank plan change.
Sorry,
And
I was on 6. My
Sorry.
apologies, committee.
so specifically around the source protection zones. One of it,
sorry.
just as an adjunct to Craig's sort of introduction, certainly there was a concern expressed at the regional planning group that at the stage when they were hearing the information, there was no time frame given to Napier City around when its source protection zones would be actually finalised. Subsequent to that regional planning committee and at the joint working group, Napier did report that they have a date with their advisors that they would hope to have the source protection zone work fully completed by the end of March next year, and that would allow, in terms of timings, for those source protection zones to be included in the final iterations of the tank plan change. So that was one of the concerns raised specifically at the regional planning meeting, and subsequent to that we've had confirmation from Napier that the end of March next year will be, their advisors will have those source protection zones graphed to include them in, so they won't be under the PPZs, which is the provisional protection zones.
So probably just to remind members that the key difference, the requirements are different. If a registered water supply has a source protection zone, an SPZ, is different to a provisional protection zone, a PPZ. The PPZ indicates that there is a registered supply in the area and a farm plan should give consideration to it, whereas the rules, the proposed rules, which obviously have to go through quite a significant process still, actually would move some activities from permitted to restricted discretionary, just to give a more oversight and input into any particular conditions or thought processes that need to go into discharges or takes or the likes.
Just through the chair, so presumably all of the councils are on target to meet that time frame to enable it to be included in the tank?
So the only two councils that are affected by the tank plan change, because it just covers Greater Hiratonga areas, Napier and Hastings. Hastings has just received their report back from Tonkin and Taylor, which has identified their source protection zones and will be including those in the notified plan change. And as the Chairman has indicated, Napier's on track to have that available by the end of March.
Right, thank you.
Through you, Chair, building on that, Hastings has done our main urban supplies, but in February we're expecting to get our smaller supplies of such as Clive, Hamoana, Te Wanga, those zones defined. They're much simpler than the bigger areas, and the reason the Napier team can move forward is we've done a lot of exploration and working out what worked and what didn't work, working out how to do Hastings so we can move quite quickly as a joint group. I think one of the items the joint working group will work through that was talked to, though it was wider and was talked by this committee, is in a later time when would it be a plan change that would create this type of provision for Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay as a wider regional plan on just this issue. So, but it'd be good to get through this one first to see what happens.
And you know, hats off to Hastings, because they're really the guinea pigs for the whole of New Zealand around this process. So I think, you know, all the other councils will benefit from the work that they've been doing. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that part of it, Craig? Okay.
No.
Chair.
Yes.
Craig, you referred to farm plans, but am I correct that if you were an industrial or commercial operation, or you would be picked up as well and would have to file whatever consent or whatever? It's just not farming activities.
Through your chair, that's absolutely correct, Councillor Belford. So industrial sites will have to have an industrial plan, very much the equivalent, but dealing with industrial issues around how they're going to do that, from not just protection of the drinking water, but also general stormwater and issues as well.
What about septic systems?
Currently, the plan change hasn't got into septic systems, but that is very much in the...
So, yeah, under the current plan, all on-site wastewater discharges over the unconfined aquifer are supposed to have consents, and we've had people out in the field actually checking. To make sure. And so once those are covered, any other provision, any other situation that's not over the unconfined aquifer, that'll have to be looked at as well in terms of requiring a consent if it's in a source protection zone.
I should know this, but this has all been flying at us pretty quickly in the tank process here. What is the confined versus unconfined aquifer distinction ceasing to be relevant as a regulatory matter? Is it giving way to these zones as the driver of what activities get regulated or not, as opposed to whether they're over a confined or unconfined?
I think when you look at the map of the proposed source protection zones for the main drinking water supply bores for Hastings, they don't demarcate between unconfined and confined. They go pretty much right back to the river.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Through your chair, I think the confined unconfined still has a place. It's just the consideration is just growing slightly wider. So Hastings' own district plan will need a review because we have a whole pile of rules what you can do, it can't do, depending confined, unconfined,
right.
And the discussions we're having as well. It's not that's one consideration, but the world's more complex than that, and we need other considerations.
You'll see also from the notes in item 5 that there was 2 other concerns raised by the Regional Planning Committee. One was around land use implications, and I think we've sort of covered that to a large degree. The third item was, though, that in terms of registered suppliers, there was certainly a question raised around smaller suppliers that might become registered, and that the cost of doing that work, though, would be an impediment to them, and that's, say, some Arise schools may fall under that category going forward, and yet they may want to become registered to get the protection of the SPZs, but they have no resources or funding to actually do the research that would be necessary to allow that to occur. And again, the comment was that was something that we would raise at this level and make sure that councils were aware that that was an issue for their own areas, and there's different ways of perhaps looking, and there is funding sometimes available in different areas. But it's a point to make that in some of these areas, there may be some people or suppliers that might want to become registered, and that's an impediment to them getting to that stage, just the cost of doing the work to understand the source protection zone.
So just through you, Chair, there was quite an extensive discussion on. There are 2 parts to what you were talking about. First of all, there's a discussion around how do you become voluntarily registered, because not everyone. There are some activities, and Dr. Jones can clarify if I get this wrong. There are some activities that are required by law under the Health Act to be registered, and then there is an ability for some activities to voluntarily put their name down to be registered. Being on the register would by default give them the provisional protection zone, that at the moment the default 2K scenario, but that doesn't have the full the full level of protection. But being registered does require a private supplier to meet a number of other obligations under the Health Act, and not all entities may want to do that, so they need to have a cut down, but a level they will need to comply with the drinking water guidelines. And so whilst not to necessarily the same extent as a large supplier with 10,000 people or more, there are obligations that you are required of you if you choose to be registered. The second part, and where the financial discussion was, is if a registered supplier wanted to develop a source protection zone, so more accurately defined, and to be afforded those higher planning provisions, what assistance or how could we assist? And the Chair's quite rightly pointed out, I think each of the territorial authorities probably need to work through that. I know from our own Hastings Council, we've had some initial discussions with our Māori Joint Committee around marae in particular. We have a marae Development Fund, which we've been using in terms of doing up some of the marae and that. So there will be discussions that will potentially come from your community as around what assistance, be it technical in kind or other, to help them develop that. But there is a first step that each individual will need to take to whether they want to be registered or not. I think Dr. Jones might have something.
Chair, would you like to?
Yes, please.
Reynold here has just clarified some of the registration requirements, so we just expand a little bit on what Craig said. So the registration requirements are set out in the Health Act, and just if I'm getting this wrong, just pipe up. People who are required to register as a drinking water supplier, communities register as a supplier supplying to 25 people or more through a reticulated supply, or a self-supply, which is where the building is essentially providing its own drinking water, where it has a community purpose. In other words, it's serving the public. So that would be a marae, for example, or another, what's another good example? A school?
School.
Yeah.
And that's perhaps the difference between a self-supply, which isn't required to be registered, so that's just someone with their own bore, and a specified self-supply, which it brings in schools, maraes and so forth. Most of those are registered already, and it doesn't cost anything to register onto the register anyway.
And in terms of the compliance costs for those, you were saying if there's less than 100 people supplied, there's pretty minimal requirements.
For example, if it was something like a small marae or something, then we're not going to go out looking for compliance on that sort of a site. But another example of a specified self-supply is like a ski field, and which puts through hundreds or thousands of people, and we do look for compliance on that size type thing. So I guess we have to weigh up a little bit what we can do work-wise and the risks to the public as well.
So coming back to the issue raised at the RPC, the question was put to us for example, for Māori communities where there may be a marae, there may be papakāinga, if they're not already registered, can they be registered? And the answer is yes. Where there's a bit of a grey area is if there's a group of homes who are all providing their own water from their own bore, say in a papakāinga situation, then technically they probably can be registered, although they're not required to be. So that's the area we've been discussing with the Ministry of Health. Of course, taking into account, though, that as the plan as it currently stands, unless any of those self-supplies went to the extent of defining a source protection zone using the methods set out in the plan, they would only be protected to the extent of a provisional source protection zone. So that's the situation at the moment. And I think, Garth, you were pointing out the cost issue. I think the cost issue is likely to be more important if, say, the marae wanted to establish a validated source protection zone and have those wider protections. Yeah.
It was really just to make council representatives aware that there may be some push from within their own communities to move in a particular path. So it's just making sure at this level there's that awareness level.
Yeah, and if I could just add one more point, I think one of the councillors on the RPC was concerned about the cumulative effect of all of these provisional protection zones kind of all joining up and making a huge area of source protection zone, and just go back to the limited protections provided to those provisional zones. So the view, at least of Tank, was that that wasn't going to be particularly overburdensome on industry or farming. Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen. Before you leave, any questions from around the table? Pin them to the wall if you have the opportunity. If not, thanks. Would someone like to move the report be received and noted? Tom, thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Liz,
Yes.
the joint working group activities, do you want to lead that? in
I
the
can,
first instance?
yeah.
And Craig has already sort of perhaps...
Craig's already
been a-
warmed everyone up for it, yeah. Stolen our thunder. So thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is the table that Rena has prepared, and it's really just going through each of the actions that and the status of where those are at. And Craig's probably highlighted the key ones for you. Obviously, in terms of our workload, it's really been around getting those tank plan provisions developed as requested by the tank group, and now getting them through the Regional Planning Committee, who've had obviously taken a significant interest in them as well, and just really trying to get them in as finalised a state as possible before the tank plan change goes out for consultation. Around the communications, I think, again, as Craig pointed out, we did have to defer a workshop that was to be held in September, but just because of lack of availability of people. But that's being worked on at the moment so that we can get a broader comms protocol based on the arsenic protocol as well. The next several of the actual actions are classed as medium priority. There's probably none there that I really need to highlight to you, other than at our joint working group meeting last week, Napier City Council was the first of the local authorities to do a presentation on their water safety plan, and it was a very, very comprehensive water safety plan. The next council to present is actually going to be Central Hawke's Bay, not Wairoa. So there's an error there in that table. Apologies for that. I don't know that there's, unless anyone else has got questions, there's probably not anything that hasn't already been reported back through a paper or through your own staff. So I'm happy just to take questions on that, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, just to ask, is there anything else, Craig, that you'd like to contribute?
Probably through you, Chair, the only one is there's a couple of action items here that the joint working group will go through, which are sort of carryovers from the oversight role of the early joint working group when the joint working group was providing a level of oversight for the government inquiry, and whereas our focus is now more forward working and thinking, so particularly where previously when the joint working group was reporting to the inquiry, Hastings was reporting all its results to it on a detailed basis. Unless this committee desires it, I'm not sure you're particularly interested in seeing pages of test results, but we can make that happen if that's what you want.
So again, pose if any questions of Liz or Craig at this stage.
There's one other matter which isn't actually on the table. At the joint working group meeting last week, we had a presentation from Wayne Jack around the proposed Three Waters review, because one of the questions that we had, I guess, was how much overlap would there be between the joint drinking water group and a higher level Three Waters review. So Wayne just really outlined where the CEs and mayors and chairs were at with that particular process, but we felt that there was enough interlinkage for both groups to be aware of what's going on, but also enough specific work to be done by the Joint Drinking Water Group, not to collapse that into the Three Waters review. So we're just keeping a watching brief on that at this stage.
Again, I'm happy to take any questions directly regarding that particular agenda item and the work that's been undertaken. Obviously, I chair the joint working group, so I'm sort of ultimately responsible to you, and in that role, I'm most probably it's just an advocate for the work that's being undertaken. But there are some changes though occurring. Rena's now taken a role, a wider role within the regional councils across New Zealand, as opposed to specifically for HBRC. So we'll be losing her services, and she's being replaced.
Kerry.
By Kerry.
Kerry Edmonds.
Sorry, for Kerry. And again, so welcome Kerry to this group, and I'm sure you'll continue the work that's been undertaken, because there's been a huge amount of work dovetailing the requirements that into the actual planning context is quite a challenge, and so I do congratulate the regional council staff for the work they've undertaken to date. Any other particular items though from the work plan as such before we? No?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
I'll ask it at this point. Maybe it's, since there's nothing else on the agenda, I gather. Does there exist somewhere a kind of a risk assessment or something that this group is monitoring on an ongoing basis in terms of things that are going on out there that might actually represent problems, arising issues, whatever? I mean, I understand this is how this work plan gets generated, but is this group supposed to be a watchdog of emerging issues or controversies or what have you? And so is there a regular risk assessment of some kind or risk analysis?
Not specifically. I mean, you'll be aware, Tom, that the Regional Council itself has public health and protection of drinking water as its number one risk and number one priority, really, in its risk assessment. And I guess that other councils may well have it, or other organisations may well have it as a very high priority as well. So we haven't, I guess, specifically developed a risk assessment, but the purpose of the Joint Drinking Water Group, one of the purposes anyway, is to, be a vehicle to bring, what may be the emerging issues to the table to look at how we might manage them or deal with them. So I'm just wondering if you've got anything specific that you wanted to raise today.
As a regional councillor, I know what might be on our radar from my perspective, but I have no idea what might be happening within a given territorial authority in terms of something that we should be aware of as a group. So these things pop up and we read about them in the newspaper before we get alerted to them through this process, which seems backwards.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, what we could do is certainly on the JWG agenda, have a standing item around emerging issues or I'll talk to the chairman about it, and we'll do that. And then obviously if there's anything that does get brought forward at a meeting, we can alert you all to that, even between meetings.
I think the key is that we do rely on the individual territorial authorities and the DHB and Ngāti Kahungunu to bring issues to the JWG as they arise, and certainly it's not a sort of a fixed or closed off agenda. We're always open to discuss issues as they're arising, and one of the items that we didn't sort of touch on is the information, the arsenic revision. Even though that protocol is in place, issues arose recently where in actual fact, that protocol needs to be retweaked and reworked because there was some gaps in it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if do you want to just touch on that? Because we didn't mention
Oh,
that.
I could just briefly. So there was another example very recently of arsenic detected in groundwater, and so the question then arose. One organisation was obviously notified. The question then arose: well, who's responsible for advising the neighbours? And the actual protocol hadn't addressed that, so we had to talk about that and are going to revise the protocol to deal with that. And I guess the communications workshop also, when we look at wider protocol, will help address some of those issues. I would hope that it would look at, we don't have to wait for meetings or agendas to contact one another, and I don't think we would anyway. I think we have a pretty good working relationship at an officer level around any issues that are arising, and being able to respond to them much more quickly than a meeting schedule might allow for.
I guess what I'm getting at is I would love to know what are the top 4 or 5 issues that Craig, lies awake at night worrying about that might hit the fan in his turf next, in terms of water quality. What is it? Is there anything, or we're all comfy and everybody's happy, not to worry? Maybe this committee can meet once a year.
Well, I think that's a valid point, and the working group will actually put it on its agenda as a specific item. So you'll see being reported back, and obviously if it's an urgent issue, it will be disseminated much quicker than just through the minute process. But I think that's a really important sort of step because we don't do it. It's only as the issues arise currently, but we can certainly formalise that process.
I think that reflects too the fact that we've been trying to deal with a situation, the consequences of the board of inquiry, but now we're getting to a point, I think, where we can start looking ahead more
Proactively.
Yeah, and that's what you've suggested is certainly going to be an important part of that.
Any other questions or queries? Would someone like to move that the working group activities update be received and noted?
Have you ever seen a map of Marae? With the 2 hectare, got it, the circles around every single one of them. And have you seen...
Item 7 is the other items for discussion.
Big circles around them?
I'm not sure, Liz.
We weren't
Mr.
notified.
Chairman, could I
Yeah,
perhaps raise
yeah, just-
an issue in there? Subsequent to our last meeting, there was some quite negative publicity that started off originally in the Warrow paper and then progressed to the Hawke's Bay Today around the DHB's role in the consenting process for, I think it was Blue Bay development. The issues continued to be raised with me by members in the Warrow community, and I just wondered if someone who understands that the issues could perhaps tell us sort of whether, I haven't talked to Nick about this, but I just wonder if someone could explain to us that situation with regard to our involvement in that consenting process.
I'm not sure. Nikki, are you in a position to give some sort of... Yep. Welcome to
Got anyone
grab
from
us.
council who can speak from the consenting side?
I might text phone Malcolm.
Charlie, do you want to comment from the Warra?
Oh, I hate to get it wrong.
So my understanding is that Blue Bay was originally a private development. They put in a wastewater system which also provides wastewater treatment for Oputama, the village. The discharge point for that system was going to be up gradient of the point at which council planned to abstract water, drinking water, for the new development. I think council's taken ownership of the development, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there, or taken responsibility for it.
We're currently trying to negotiate that with the regional council.
Right. And then there was, I understand Reynolds here, so he can chip in, but there was council came to the District Health Board and to the Regional Council to work through the issues of the water supply. So on the one hand is the consent required for the taking of that water, and for that with the intention to supply it as a drinking water source. And on the other hand was discussions around the compliance under the drinking water standard, which took place, which was discussions through Reynolds as a drinking water assessor. Then council also, I think so, the regional council decided it would grant the consent subject to a water safety plan being provided by the District Health Board. So the District Health Board, the drinking water assessor, went ahead and did approve a water safety plan. Now in that water safety plan, it said that we strongly recommend not using a water source that is in the plume of pollutants from a septic tank, from a wastewater treatment. And we also made that point to the Regional Council. I did speak to one of the planning officers at the Regional Council and said that we thought that there would have to be a strong justification for taking that approach. There is a section within the drinking water standard that provides for the use of water that can be subject to wastewater to be used as a drinking water source. It obviously has to go through a great deal more treatment. But of course the major limitation with that is if the treatment breaks down, then you've got contaminated water being served to your community. The other major concern we had is that the treatment requirements within the current standard deal with viruses, or probably most viruses, protozoa and bacteria, but there is no provision within the standard to remove things like endocrine disrupting chemicals or other new pollutants that we know are present in wastewater discharge. So certainly my view was that it was not the ideal approach, and we recommended against it. So moving on, the other point, I guess, is there potentially could have been an option for putting in a more advanced treatment system like a reverse osmosis treatment, which would remove some of those other contaminants, but that wouldn't be required by the standard. So then my understanding was there was discussions between the Regional Council and Wairau District Council, and Wairau District Council decided against going with that approach and actually looking for an alternative source. And so the consent actually was dropped.
So the council's made the decision based on the information that was given rather than you preventing a decision being made?
Absolutely, yeah. And the other point is that there were a number of other reports that it received. So council received a report from, I think, Paddle Duddlemore, which is an expert on groundwater, that strongly recommended against that approach. And so that report was shared with me as well, which sort of reinforced our concerns.
I think sort of the thing that probably disturbs me with this is obviously the communication around that decision with the relevant media could have been done sort of more accurately and in a positive way, rather than, you know, the DHB have blocked this project from proceeding as planned.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I felt in a way it should have been a good news story that council is taking a sensible approach.
And it became quite negative, didn't it? Yeah.
Could I raise a question about that? I mean, it seems to me that's in a way why we are here as a group. I would have assumed that it was great news that the DHB, vigilant protector of public health in Hawke's Bay, looked at the situation and said, you guys haven't thought this through adequately. We're not satisfied with what you're proposing to do, and we put a big red light on it. I would have said that's exactly what I thought the DHB should do.
I think one of the problems was that the way the story was portrayed is that it appeared that there was inconsistent advice being provided by the DHB. On the one hand, we were saying it's fine, go ahead. On the other hand, we were saying don't. So that was probably one of the things that bothered us.
So in general, should the public think that who is the ultimate protector of the suitability of our drinking water at the end of the day? Is it DHB making a judgment as the public health expert, or is it a territorial authority who is, on whatever basis, some consulting advice or something, saying here's an adequate set of conditions for you to pump water out and put it in our glass?
I think if you look at the legal situation, it's actually the water supply has the duty. And
so has this changed at all since Havelock? Are we right where we started?
Well, we have an auditing and oversight role, so the two duties overlap, and clearly in this instance we arrived at the right decision by that process. And obviously the Regional Council, having been just going through this major issue around source water protection, was highly alert to the issue of granting a consent for a supply with a contaminated source.
Yeah, there's actually no water supply for there, is there?
Well,
They've one board, they really want another board, but...
So, I mean, I'm interested in your perspective, Charlie, so...
Yeah, well, I think it's also started from the developer. He actually auctioned all the land
Right.
on the basis that they had water protection and that the water supply was going to be in place. So
Right.
all those sections were sold.
Right.
But yeah, they just don't have a supply. They're going to have to go back to rainwater.
Right.
Getting confused the more this conversation goes on. Where do the drinking water assessors fit into the regulatory issue?
The drinking water assessor approves the water safety plan and it audits the compliance with the standard. So
Their role is primarily to audit, not
yes,
not to control.
But obviously we're trying to be helpful
Yes.
and give council advice as to what is likely to comply. But the standard is a moving feast, as we all know, and it's quite possible that this Chapter 10 that allows you to do this more risky approach may not survive. So there's a higher level of caution being applied across the whole sector.
Through you, Chair, just I guess hopefully to provide a level of comfort as Nick's pointed out, there are some clear legal positions in places, but actually through that joint working group and through Marie Rodler, who's one of the public health unit team, there is actually a lot of sharing and discussions going on, so it's not just a formal relationship. So those learning from each other, and we actually talked informally around the Blue Bay issues and just sort of collective view, and quite frankly the current legislative and planning frameworks aren't the most efficient to deal with this in a really tidy way, and hopefully if central government actually start making some decisions, we'll move past what is a farcical drinking water standards and some of the current regulatory regimes that this fits under to help do these proper outcomes in an easier fashion.
I take the point though.
The issue that I'm raising really is we're working a lot better than we ever have sort of prior to the Havelock issue. We've got to make sure that our comms with the media reflects the way we're working together in a more positive way than we allowed the situation at Warrell to be presented. That's
I think that was going to be my point. I think this highlights it in terms of the comms work, which is historically tended to be reactive. We need to actually be on the front foot with these issues in particular through the joint working group and actually proactively advance comms, particularly where it's advancing the safer drinking water concept across the region.
Yep. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Mr Chair, coming in late, sorry.
Sorry, this is Malcolm Miller, the Regional Council Consents Manager.
So the Regional Council processed that consent, but as Craig said, we did, it was in the context of discussing tank that we I put this on the table as an example of sort of how we should be managing going forward, because it sort of stuck out like a sore thumb really that it was proceeding in the manner proposed, and certainly from the joint working group point of view, it wasn't a good look to be consenting a take in this situation where we're getting more emphasis on the multiple barrier approach, making sure that the water quality is safe from the outset, if possible, before it's then taken in and then perhaps treated further. So we worked, was with the consent consultant rather than directly with Wairau District to sort of say what are the alternatives and to work them towards going to the alternative bore away from the effect of the effluent discharge area, which we thought was a good outcome, but then it sort of came back to an issue of cost and so on. But I suppose the thing I wanted to say was Wairau is not particularly active in the joint working group at our level, so they weren't actually there when we had the discussion, so they weren't hearing it from the group's point of view that it wasn't the ideal solution and didn't really fit well with what we're trying to do. So I just mentioned that.
Thanks, Malcolm. So any other questions of officers regarding this particular issue for clarification purposes?
Does sound like we probably need someone from Wairau on the joint working group.
Well, you have a representative, but he hasn't attended.
I think he's resigned, isn't he?
Jamie, has he resigned?
He has resigned.
Okay, yeah, so you need another
So
attendee.
you need a new representative.
I thought he might have
And
been.
we're very happy to have a put it all.
Is it Jamie Cox? To resign.
Okay. Is there any further items for general discussion? If not, I'll declare the meeting closed. But in doing so, I ask Charles to.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ai te atua ka harawa kei kanei mātou e te mutunga ihi o tātou nei hui. Tēnā koe mō te manaakitanga mō te aroha. Hei te aki e he arahi e mātou I tēnei ata. Ko koe tonu tō tātou kaupaka ora āmene. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.
I'm coming